Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to the Castle Dracula Horror Movie Podcast. On this podcast, we talk about horror movies, vampire movies, and all-around awesomeness. And this week, we continue our Dark Shadows retrospective, where we're looking at every movie incarnation of the popular vampire horror saga, Dark Shadows. And today, we're covering the 2012 Tim Burton film, Dark Shadows. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the Alex Van Helsing series from HarperCollins and the upcoming game Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows from Activision. With me are Drew Edwards, creator of the long-running horror webcomic Halloween Man, which you can find at HalloweenMan.com, and he's also a writer for Rockabilly Magazine and a writer now for Bela Lugosi Presents. Say hello, Drew.
Hello.
Hello. That was a long introduction, and which is great. You're just adding more and more things to your resume every week. All right, Adam Foshko, also adding things to his resume. Screenwriter and consulting producer for games like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 3, Skylanders Giants, and a new one. What was it again, Adam?
Swamp Force. Skylanders Swamp Force.
Wow, Swamp Force. Okay, very good.
Swamp Force,
and once again, with color commentary, the host of our competing podcast, Pod Moms.
Not competing.
Attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello, Julia.
I'm not competing. Totally different audience.
and because I'm inclined now to let everybody know where we are. Drew is down in Texas. Adam is off in Los Angeles, and Julia and I are now in Denver, Colorado, which is why we've actually been gone for a few weeks, because we've been moving and we're still encased in boxes, and it's craziness, but we are back. So, okay, Dark Shadows, the film, is a 2012 American horror comedy film based on the Gothic soap opera of the same name, produced for television from 66 to 71, which have been looking at movies based on that. The film is directed by Tim Burton and stars Johnny Depp as Barnabas Collins, a 200-year-old vampire who has been imprisoned in a coffin. Collins is eventually unearthed and makes his way back to his mansion, now inhabited by his dysfunctional descendants. Collins also discovers that his jealous ex-lover, Angelique Bouchard, played by Eva Green of Casino Royale, has taken over the town's fishing business that was once run by the Collins family. And she's a witch who was responsible for turning him into a vampire. Michelle Pfeiffer also stars as Collins' cousin, Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, the reclusive matriarch of the Collins family. All right, that is a very dry recitation of what this movie is about. I think we watched this again just last night. I'm ready to talk about Dark Shadows. So let's go. Drew, Julia, Adam, and Jason, first impressions, and let's get into it. So, first impressions, Dark Shadows 2012, Drew.
Well, a lot of times during this podcast, I'm going to sound like I hate this movie. I do not actually hate it. I think it's got some very good performances in it. It's got a lot of great art direction. However, it is also tremendously infuriating as far as the screenplay goes, and there's like so many just stupid and crass jokes in it that it makes me want to pull my teeth out with pliers at times. So I alternate between really liking this movie and really hating it. So I guess in short, without going into too much more, I think this is a tremendous missed opportunity for Tim Burton to do something really cool.
Wow, very good. Okay. Julia, your first impressions of Dark Shadows.
Well, I found it amusing. I mean, I've seen it once before, and I hadn't actually watched any of the Dark Shadows movies before I watched it the first time. So I think it's a little different now watching it, having seen the original series movies. But I think it's funny. I mean, it's just I'm such a sucker for anything that Johnny Depp does, and especially with Tim Burton. So to me, it's just, there's a lot of fun to it, and I really enjoy all the 1972 stuff like that. Especially, I think my favorite thing is when he, the Carpenter song. Like there's the montage with the Carpenter song, and then when he like is dramatically leaning on the synthesizer, and it just starts playing. I don't know. I know that it's cheesy, but it's just I found it really fun. So I get a kick out of this movie.
Outstanding. Adam, what are your first thoughts, especially having been with us for the last couple of Dark Shadows movies? Thinking about that, we just a couple weeks ago talked about the spooky night of Dark Shadows, and here we are. So what does that bring us to?
It has 100% less Quentin Collins, which is disappointing. But I was really looking forward to this picture when I first heard about it, and I thought it was a brilliant idea to take the sort of the concept of the 70s, 60s actually, soap opera, and then kind of play it up as a 70s parody sort of thing. And it's very colorful. I love Johnny Depp in it. I think the pairing of Burton and Depp, was a great idea. There are a lot of things I really like about this picture. It definitely has a very strong beginning, and it gains enough momentum. I think it falls apart somewhere in the middle, but you just kind of ride with it until the end. It just seems like the world is bright and sort of colorful and interesting enough to sort of keep you occupied. But don't look for a very strong story with it. Having said that, I have a weird place in my heart for this picture, so it's a kind of a guilty pleasure. I won't say it's it's not a great picture, so it isn't one of the best Tim Burton films, but I really do think that it's one of probably the better Dark Shadows pictures, simply because it doesn't take itself particularly seriously, and there are a lot of little bits in it that if for some reason you feel like you're starting to lose momentum in the picture, a bit will come along and it'll be it'll sort of captivate you and sort of keep you going. So I gotta tell you, I like it. I do like it. I agree that it was a bit of a missed opportunity, but having said that, I really like it.
It's funny when you were talking about guilty pleasures or movies where there's a whole bunch of bits that you can enjoy. The thing that popped into my head was Paul Rubens, the Tim Burton, like the first major Tim Burton picture, which was Pee Wee Herman. Pee Wee Herman's, what was it called? The Big Adventure or
Pee Wee's Big Adventure, yeah.
Yeah, Pee Wee's Big Adventure, and I'd totally forgotten that was Tim Burton. That was actually this guy who seems prone to make these movies that are just stuffed to the gills with stuff, And my feeling about this, probably as the biggest Dark Shadows fan here, even though I'm a recent Dark Shadows fan of the last couple of years, I'm straight down the middle. I really agree with Drew that I feel like there's kind of a missed opportunity, but I also think that it's very good at what it sets out to be, because for some crazy reason, this is essentially Tim Burton's all-star Dark Shadows skit special. I mean, this is like a thing that is intended to sort of make you think about Dark Shadows and movies like that, and it's a skit, essentially. It even has like a special guest doing music. It has Alice Cooper who shows up, and it has
actually many special guests. I mean, because Chris Lee is in it. I mean, there are people who just show up in this picture.
No, that's right. And it's essentially, these are really the same guys who did Sweeney Todd, which we just did like about a month or so ago. This is another Tim Burton, and it has Johnny Depp, and it has Helena Bonham Carter. So it's, this is that crew, and this time they've done, an all-star Dark Shadows special. So let's get into it. Let's see. I want to talk about hit on various things like the characters and the tone, but we should probably begin just by talking about Johnny Depp himself and his version of Barnabas Collins, and then we'll go into sort of the overall tone of the picture. Now, for the last movie, I guess it was the movie before, we saw Jonathan Frid as Barnabas Collins, and so basically, for those of you just joining, and for some reason you're listening to this without having listened to the other ones, the concept here is that, like we said in the intro, Barnabas is a landed gentry who has been cursed by a witch who is in love with him to be a vampire, and then he was locked away, and in the course of this movie, he is freed after having slept for 200 years. And what did you guys think of Johnny Depp's interpretation of Barnabas Collins here?
Well, I'll say that I think I said to you when I was watching this film that I can't remember a time when I have watched Johnny Depp and thought he was a convincing romantic lead, and that's certainly the case here, where he's always convincing as just a weirdo freak, and in this case, I mean, weirdo freak vampire who's traveled 200 miles, 200 years into the future, basically. That totally he does great, but I don't believe the love story is the thing. I don't believe him being like the one true love, with now their names are escaping me, but he's got the what's the initial girl?
Well, Josette.
Josette.
In love with that.
Right, and then in modern day,
her name is Victoria.
Victoria. But anyway, so he, I don't buy that relationship, but I think that he does a great job with the whole, like the whole thing with the, he sees the headlights coming down, and he thinks it's Mephistopheles or whatever, and he's just like, I mean, all that stuff where he's just interpreting everything and. I just love it. I think that's all a lot of fun.
I got to say, those bits I really love. I do like the fish out of water stuff. Go ahead. You were going to say something, Drew.
Well, you say, you don't believe the love story, and I would agree with that. But what I do like about this character, and what I do believe, what he is convincing us, is this sort of extremely old-fashioned yet very endearing loyalty to his family. And I wish, honestly, I know they were adapting Dark Shadows, so there were certain things that they had to kind of throw in there, so it would be Dark Shadows. But I would honestly be okay with them cutting a lot of the characters from the show out of the movie, so there could be more of just that family interaction, because that was the stuff that I found myself really liking. I like that. I like how square the Johnny Depp Barnabas Collins is. He's really relentlessly unhip, which is like the complete opposite of the way vampires normally are in movies, where they're just the coolest person in the room.
What were you gonna? Did you say something, Adam?
No, that's true. I like that. I hadn't thought of it that way before. It's a really good observation.
It's some of the best comedy I've ever seen involving vampires coming forward 200 years, because usually you just skip this stuff. I mean, this is the plot that happened in the soap opera. I mean, Jonathan Frid as Barnabas got, let out of his coffin, and then he immediately goes straight to the castle that they all live in, and he's sort of no worse for the wear. And by merely showing the trip from the grave to the big house, you get all this business. I mean, Tim Burton manages to get business out of Barnabas studying the asphalt of the road that he followed. It's amazing. I mean, it's really cool seeing Johnny Depp, go, what strange terrain this is, and that those bits continue for the whole picture. Later on, he's at the TV, and he has probably the best line in the whole movie, where he's watching Karen Carpenter on the television and says, "What sorcery is this?"
No, but I like when he says, "So like come out of their tiny songstress."
Yeah, it's a funny bit.
Those are wonderful bits. I mean, and I'm trying to figure out if, let's say, for instance, I keep thinking of alternate ways that Burton could have done this. He could have done this movie as a way more straight, like gothic horror film, but in theory, he could have still kept some of these fish out of water bits. But to be honest, I think you kind of have to go one or the other. Yeah,
it wouldn't have been any fun. By the way, are you aware that a lot of the people, including Jonathan Frid from the original series, have cameos in this film? Did you notice them?
I didn't. I could swear that I noticed David Selby, who played Quentin. I think I noticed him on the rope line at the point where Eva Green later on accuses the family of harboring a murderer, which she's right about, by the way. So let's talk briefly about the plot. So first, there's a framing that we begin in the past, and Johnny Depp tells us the story of the Collins family and how they came to America from England, and they started to run this fishing village, and they put down stakes, and they built this enormous house, and they ran the town of Collinsport. And young Barnabas grows up as, the main son of this household. And he has a sort of young playmate / later lover who is Angelique. And you'll remember, Angelique was the ghost in the last movie that we saw, in fact. And also, this is a story lifted straight from the soap opera. I mean, this is all soap stuff, that Angelique was in love with Barnabas. And now, I can't recall if Angelique is the one who cursed him and made him a vampire in the first place, but that's what happens here, is he rejects her, and so she vows vengeance, and she basically orchestrates the death of his parents and then the death of his beloved Josette, this beautiful woman, and then she orchestrates that when Johnny Depp dies, he will become a vampire, which he does. And then she orchestrates getting him locked up and buried alive for 200 years. So we really rapidly go through this lovely tour of the past and meet all the characters who will then pop up again in the present. Because immediately there is the coolest transition I saw all year. I mean, and I mean this, as disappointed or whatever as I might be in this movie from minute to minute, and I can never decide, this transition is gorgeous. When they go from the past to all of a sudden there's this, it's Maine, and there's a long passenger train moving through the woods, and they're playing Nights on White Satin, and it's 1972. That is so cool. It's a great, great bit.
I love the use of music throughout this whole film, actually. They did some really neat things.
Yes.
I don't even like the Moody Blues, and I like the way they use the song here.
You don't like the Moody Blues?
I don't like that kind of music, man. It just doesn't do it for me.
No, I understand. Yeah, no, it's true. It's hippie music. I love the Moody Blues. I saw the Moody Blues in concert in college.
It works really well here. It's incredibly atmospheric, and it's a beautiful overhead shot of that train. So I'm in complete agreement.
Well, and when that happens, bear in mind, up until this point, so we had that whole scene in the past, and there was nothing funny about it, and now we've got this with the train and Moody Blues, and this girl on the train who's taking a job as a governess. And so far, it is so far from being a parody that there's no hint whatsoever that that's the way this movie is going to go. And you see her sitting there, it's Bella Heathcote, I guess, and you see her sitting there in the train, and she's sort of reciting how she's going to introduce herself to take this job. And here a weird thing is, we find out that she's going to lie about her name. Her real name is Maggie, she's Maggie Evans, and she's going to lie and call herself Victoria Winter. And this is the first really strange choice that Tim Burton makes, because that means that he has taken two characters, not that anybody cares, but he's taken two characters from the soap opera and smashed them together. Because Maggie Evans and Victoria Winters were two different governesses on the soap opera. Now, we already talked last episode about the fact that Dark Shadows itself posited that there are many doors at Collinwood, and they all lead to alternate dimensions. So we truly are looking at yet another Dark Shadows dimension. This time, it's this one where Maggie and Victoria are the same. So let's see. That's beautiful. It's foggy. It's Nights in White Satin. And then she gets to... now, does Barnabas actually... When does he come back? Does he come back before she gets there? Oh, no. She's on the way, and more or less at the same time...
Yeah, because remember, she gets the message from the ghost.
Right,
who says he's coming.
Yeah, so it's still spooky as heck. She gets to the house, and now there's a little bit of humor, but it's very dark humor because she meets everybody in the house. She meets Jackie Earle Haley, who plays groundskeeper Willie, and he is fantastic. I mean, he's really, he's so grimy and awful and truly just dumb as a box of rocks and because she goes, it must be so wonderful for a family to have a whole town named after them. And he goes, what do you mean? And she goes, well, the town is called Collinsport, and they're the Collinses. And he goes, oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, I never caught that before. Right.
So, you know, we meet the whole family. We meet matriarch Michelle Pfeiffer and her, you know, spiteful teenage daughter and her nephew, David, who is a spooky little boy. And that the little boy is the one that the governess has come to talk about. And I got to throw this in. If you are a fan of Gothics, you know, like true old Gothic novels and everything, the plot that we've got so far is the, like, it is the perfect World of Forms Gothic plot, that a girl kind of trying to escape from her past and trying to reinvent herself goes to a great mansion and becomes a governess and is going to discover lots of secrets. At this point, this is a movie that is basically it's just Tim Burton saying, I'm going to make a big Gothic romance and I'm going to put it up on the screen. And the fact that nobody's made a movie like this in 30 years, it doesn't matter at all. I mean, a true old-fashioned Gothic romance in a big house.
I got to say that I'm wondering if the Julia storyline is common for Gothic stories like that, because it really bugs me that they have this quote-unquote psychiatrist who has been there for 3 years, who doesn't even interact with the child anymore.
Right.
And she's supposedly there to work with this child who is, you know, who's been seeing a ghost of his mother and everything. But she doesn't even, like, why is she there? That's the only thing. I love Helena Bonham Carter, but
she's there because she's in the show. Like, she's one of the characters I wish they would have just cut out. Like, she's a big part of the TV.
I think Drew's right.
She's a big part of the TV show, but she serves no purpose here. And you know, they bump her off as soon as they can.
Yeah. I think you're right about that.
I think one of the things, though, about her, I mean, I was in the sort of same boat as you, Julia. I was sort of like, well, there's a fifth wheel here. I don't exactly know what she's doing there. But as I thought about it, it also occurred to me that, you know, there's this very kind of wealthy family, and, you know, if for no other reason, she's there to sort of to continue to underscore their dysfunction, up to and including letting a hanger-on like her sort of still kind of be there with no apparent sort of real function. But she's still getting paid. She still has a room. She's still doing her thing, though she's on sabbatical or whatever. You know, so it underscores the fact that they're not very in touch with, you know, reality. They just sort of let this woman kind of stay, and you know, it does sort of do that. It helps to sort of paint a picture of them, which is, you know, kind of
so rich they don't know what the heck to do with all that money. Hey, remember in the last movie,
they never really do anything with it. Like, you're right, I guess, in that, but they never really do anything with the character.
No, they really don't. I mean, but that would be, apart from her just being in the original show, you know, that's the only other thing that she kind of does until she's brought in later in the second act, I guess.
Well, in House of Dark Shadows, this character existed to be the one that Barnabas would pin his hopes on the fact that she, as a scientist, would be able to cure him. And I must not have been paying enough attention, because it seems to me that they kind of make reference to, it goes really fast. There seems to be a plot in here where she is trying to cure Barnabas of his vampirism, but she's actually using his blood to try to become a vampire.
Right.
But all of this is accomplished in essentially like 2.5 scenes of plot with Dr. Julia.
Right.
And so it's easy to miss. It's easy to like go, wow, you know. But remember that is the plot from the soap, and it's the plot from the first Dark Shadows movie. I noticed, by the way, they are missing the other guy. Yeah.
I understand all that, but it would have been a better movie if they would have just cut that character out and maybe saved her for a sequel.
I agree with you completely. I completely.
It is cluttered. I mean, she definitely adds clutter. All I will say, her eyes look kind of the same as the first Doctor, so I think it was just sort of. I think it's probably meant to give Helena Bonham Carter something to do, but also, you know, because you know you really can't have the Tim Burton film without Helena Bonham Carter. Love her though I do.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about the way she portrays Julia, and that gives us a way into the look of this whole movie, because the way that they have Helena Bonham Carter dressed is somewhat similar to the way that they appeared in the first Dark Shadows film. But here's the strange thing: this movie takes place in 1972, and boy, you can tell by these clothes. These clothes are, and they said that they patterned the clothes after the stuff that the cast was wearing in one of my favorite movies that we've got to do someday, which is Legend of Hell House. You know, so it's all these like wonderful sort of big bright greens and plaids and all this crazy stuff. And that's not like the show at all. The show, first of all, the show took place, was like mid to late 60s and ending in like 71 or so. And second, everybody hanging out at the mansion more or less dressed so classically that you couldn't quite tell what decade they were in, with the exception of Carolyn, who tended to dress like Daphne on Scooby-Doo. She wore these little No, she did.
No, I just never thought about that till you just said it.
But
you're totally right. In here though, this movie doesn't just take place supposedly in 72. It's like a super 72. It's like the ultimate expression of 1972. Why? Can anyone tell me why this happened? I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just trying to understand what
I think they just have it be the year after the show is over so that they don't have to mess with the timeline of the show. So there's no question of, well, how does this fit in with what's going on in the show?
Is that it, or is that just sort of one of the, when you look back at the 1970s and fashion and everything else, it's where we start to really lose, it's the potent 70s fashions, whatever they might be, sort of the early 70s, because it descends into horror after that. You get into leisure suits and other sort of, which is a good deal more Beetlejuice than it is this. You start getting, powder blue leisure suits. You get that kind of thing. But this is sort of the ultimate expression in the early 70s. We still had some of the really interesting, modness of the 60s leading into the 70s. But right after this, it goes off a cliff into terrible fashion. So I just sort of I began to think that it was certainly the most stylish part of the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, it must be. I can
What
year
did the last Dark Shadows movie come out?
Okay, so let's take a look at that. That was Night of Dark Shadows. Let's see. I want to say Night of Dark Shadows came out in 1971. So, and remember the way that
maybe the first Dark Shadows things Tim Burton saw were the movies.
Well, it's possible. That is possible. I mean, I don't know anything about Tim Burton's age, but there's no reason to believe that he necessarily would remember the soap from the afternoon. Everybody of a certain age, everybody in their 40s and on, pretends that they ran home and watched Dark Shadows.
But that's what they say. Yeah, they say that in the trivia on IMDb.
But the thing is, everybody says that. It's like everybody's saying that they were at certain.
I'm just saying that the trivia and the trivia on IMDb says that Tim Burton, Johnny Depp, and Michelle Pfeiffer were all fans of the original Dark Shadows, having watched it when they were young.
Yeah. So
I don't have a hard time believing that Tim Burton was a fan of Dark Shadows. Does anybody really not believe that? Let's be honest here. It's in line with his well-established interests.
No, that's a really good point. I think it's entirely possible. If you look at the movie like Night of Dark Shadows, and the way that everybody was dressed, it's more similar to the way that they're dressed in this movie. I think he probably just decided that 1972 was a more interesting looking place and it had more interesting music. Because if he had put it in 1967, I mean, what kind of music is he going to be playing? Is it going to be, Sugar, Sugar? I mean, what is he going to play in 1967? And it, I don't know. I'm trying to think of late 60s.
I remember seeing a thing with Tim Burton when he was talking about Johnny Depp in Willy Wonka, in that picture, and he was saying that he basically had worked with Depp to sort of pattern him after a 1970s style sort of game show host with all the sort of weird awkwardness and kind of everything else. It wasn't just that he was, somebody who was reclusive. I mean, there was that, but specifically a 70s English game show host, which is, continues to underscore the fact that I think that he has, I think, a visual connection, with kind of the 70s, and I think there's probably this is the same costume designer who's been with him on a bunch of different stuff, from Sleepy Hollow and got all the way back to Edward Scissorhands. I mean, all this stuff. I think there was just a very, I think the 70s just resonates with him visually.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think this is the time in the 70s that's sort of most kind of expressive of that era.
Well, and Tim Burton was born to answer your question, Jason, in 1958. So 70s is when he's in his, teen years. So that's what, like, with us, the 80s are a big, we think about the 80s for everything. So it's just a really special time in his, development.
And I'm to be honest with you, it's my favorite thing about this movie. It is really, it's so great. The look is just killer. All these clothes are amazing, And if you look back on, think about a movie like Horror House, with Frankie Avalon. The one, has anybody seen this? The slasher movie from London.
Wow.
And that was done in 1969, and it has a lot of these same sort of, jeans and like plaid pants and all that stuff. You say, wow. So you do vaguely remember this.
Yeah, I know. I do. I'm just amazed you do.
I unfortunately spent my entire childhood watching The Late Show.
That's okay. Listen, I remember The Phantom of Soho, or The Hunchback of Soho.
I don't know The Hunchback of Soho. Tony Savaggio, every time he's on the show, which is all of them, really, he loves to mention Kiss Meets the Phantom, which we have to actually do. If we figure out a way to do another cycle of musical horror, we've got to do Kiss Meets the Phantom. Okay. Now I'm completely lost because we're talking about Kiss and Frankie Avalon and Soho. All right. So 1972 is the time. Now we move immediately into the plot where Barnabas realizes that Julia is actually trying to, Dr. Julia. There's two plots going on. Dr. Julia is trying to siphon off Barnabas's power for herself because she wants to be immortal. Meanwhile, Barnabas is engaged in the major plot of deciding that he is tired of the fact that the family has fallen on hard times and that Roger, this no-good-nick, brother of Elizabeth, is living in the house and not being a very good father to David. And he's going to fix all of this. And we have this montage, delightful montage, to the tune of On Top of the World by the Carpenters, as he sort of just moves like a vampire Mary Poppins and sort of fixes everything up.
See, that's what I need. I need a montage, like in Team America, whatever.
Yeah.
I need a montage to unpack all these boxes, because that's how, it moves so much more smoothly when you have a montage to take care of things for you.
Yeah, when you can kind of keep skipping. And he even has, the bits that in Team America they call out the cliches that make a montage, including cutting back to like one consistent thing that keeps happening over and over. And the consistent bit in this montage is Collins, the vampire, trying to find a comfortable place to sleep.
Yeah, it's so funny when the old lady opens the cupboard or whatever, and he's up on the top shelf.
Yes, with his sort of gnarled claws and yeah,
they did a great job with that Nosferatu thing with the fingers,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean his vampire is a wackadoo vampire. I mean it really is. It's very Nosferatu-ish. It's it's cool. It's a very cool version, and I love the fact that considering that Johnny Depp likes Jonathan Frid a lot, he's not doing Jonathan Frid at all.
No.
I mean, not that. I mean, Jonathan Frid probably doesn't lend himself to an impression. Jonathan Frid's great, and people really were in love with him, but there's nothing about Jonathan Frid in my mind that makes him a memorable character. There's no turn of phrase. I mean, he's memorable because he's a memorable actor, but there was nothing gimmicky about him, nothing that you could like pin an impression on.
I think Jonathan Fred is very interesting looking, and that's why his Barnabas, he didn't really have monster makeup on. It's because he's got that great craggy looking face.
Yes.
Johnny Depp.
It was impossible to pin down exactly how old Jonathan Frid was. He could be anywhere from his 40s to his 60s in those pictures. Anyway, so we do that. They do that great montage, and then he decides to kill Dr. Julia because he works out that she's betraying him. And meanwhile, he's trying to make time with Josette, who has been reincarnated as Victoria here, and that plot, once again, that favorite plot that just keeps that keeps popping up. So
it's interesting to me, by the way, that they keep bringing back the fact that he really is a vampire. Like when he's hanging out with the hippies in the woods, and he's like, "Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to kill you all," and then he kills them all. So he's not a vampire with a heart of gold. He is actually an evil vampire who will kill easily with no problem.
Yeah, like Drew said, he's loyal to the family.
Yeah.
And he's in love with this girl. But it's true. He's a complete murderer. He has no problem whatsoever with killing, all the hippies who are hanging out.
Well, he does seem like he feels bad about it on some level, but it's more like, oh, I feel kind of bad that I stepped on all these ants.
Right. No, that's right. That's he's I don't think that he would wish being a vampire on anybody, but I don't think he's overly consumed with guilt about the things that he does as a vampire. And in fact, that's actually going to get us to the major, the thing that happens at the end, because we very quickly get to a climax here. Angelique, who has been she hasn't been reincarnated. She's just immortal. She works out that Barnabas is back, and it's really wonderful seeing her, try to make sense out of Barnabas's return and try to seduce him to her side. But eventually, she decides that she's going to destroy him, and we move into the sort of suddenly this moves into like a big third act where you have a lot of fireballs, you have a giant fight inside Collinwood, and Angelique starts hauling out a whole bunch of magical powers. So, in fact, I first of all, Ava Green. Let's talk a little bit about Ava Green in the part of Angelique. Now, I only knew Ava Green from Casino Royale, so it's kind of cool here seeing her in this role. To the extent that I know Angelique from the soap opera, I barely remember it at all. So but she's good. I don't think her American accent makes any sense at all. It sounds weird.
But it's cool. It's interesting. That's the thing. She's not meant to sound like a normal American because she's a witch and she's been around for hundreds of years. So she's had all these years and years and years of accents of presumably different, generations that have come through there with different accents. So I mean, I love how she talks. I think it's the coolest, and especially her, like just this weirdness to her voice. It's kind of like a little bit like Michelle Pfeiffer actually in the Catwoman. Just like the I don't know. I wouldn't even try to do it.
I think she's one of the saving graces of this movie. Like I really like her physical acting, like the way she just contorts her face. These sort of weird little, almost like a female Joker at times. She's very creepy, actually.
Yeah, and to juxtapose, there are two women in Barnabas's life, really, that he's interested in. There's Angelique, who he's rejected because she's been so cruel, but they still have this big love scene because she wants him back in her life, and she's so twisted and crazy. And so their chemistry is really great. And then he has, at the same time, this sort of almost pure love story where he's in love with the sweet ingenue, who nevertheless is prone to seeing ghosts and a little flaky, which is Josette Victoria. So anyway, we wind up in this huge conflagration, Act 3, where it's Angelique versus the vampire. We work, suddenly all kinds of revelations happen. We find out that the teenage girl is a werewolf, something we didn't know.
That
the entire
made
picture.
me want to yank my hair out.
Yeah,
that was
I have to agree.
stupid.
I agree.
And I'm a sucker for a werewolf, but come on.
Yeah, I agree with you.
You can say, and I remember saying this, you can say, well, there were werewolves in the show, so it's okay that there are werewolves here. But the thing is, somebody watching this movie doesn't know the show necessarily. It's not fair.
All right. I got a question. I'm sorry. Now that you brought up the werewolf thing and you opened up that wound, and thank you for pouring salt and lemon juice into that. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Here's my bottom line question, and that is, I think Drew's going to be the first one out of the gate with this. Is this a Seth Graham-Smith problem? Is it? Are we looking? Go ahead.
Sorry,
looking at basically.
Continue.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of clever adaptation, I think, in the work that you sort of done before. As we've sort of discussed, as I talked to Jason about it, I was not a giant fan of the film adaptation of Abraham Lincoln.
Okay. And I wasn't either. Go ahead.
But I just wanted to pull my eyes out, and they have, and just tied them around my head, just keep from seeing it. But there are bits in this where if you think about it, and I know this was all Burton's thing. It was developed, I think, also sort of independently for a while too. So my question is, is it someone going, look, here's a bunch of the old tapes, come up with something? Is it a studio problem where basically they hire someone who is kind of good at clever adaptation to synthesize something, and then it's just got all these different parallel threads? Probably would have been a better novelization than an actual screenplay. And then layered on top of that, then you have that's then used as source when Burton comes in and does his work on top of it. So you have this very visually stunning set design and costume design and production design, and you've got the typical high watermarks of Depp and Helena Bonham Carter, and just individually these assets are really, really good, and together they he paints that picture really nicely. Burton does, but because you're dealing with a script that's kind of a mishmash, it doesn't ever get resolved. It doesn't have a strong driving force. It's got too many characters, which is what the stuff suffered from originally. But I don't think that they were just trying to do that.
I do know this. I know that they originally had another script that was serious. They were originally going to do a straight up one, and apparently they decided because of Twilight and things like that there wasn't room for a straight Gothic romance, which just doesn't make any sense to me.
I think they would have done better if they had played in the box. We can argue whether or not it'd be a better movie. That's a whole other thing. It definitely would have done better at the box office if they had done a straight vampire movie than the sort of SNL tinged version.
You're probably right. Though one of the things that appealed to me out of the gate was the fact that it was being handled like this. So I thought, I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen that lately since Love at First Bite. You know what I mean? I haven't seen that in a while.
A lot of the jokes don't work for me though. Like a lot of the jokes are either crass or unfunny.
That's execution.
Give me an example of a crass joke, because I didn't.
Well, a good crass, like Helena Bonham Carter gives Barnabas Collins a blowjob? I mean,
yes.
really? Did we need that?
I mean, you can't unsee that.
No, okay.
Yeah,
Very good.
well, I mean, they don't
right.
they don't show it, but it's heavily implied, and frankly, it's stupid.
No, I agree.
You know?
I'm with you. Yeah. Okay. That's true. Oh, so Adam's question was, can we blame this on Seth Grahame-Smith? I heavily, but I blame it mainly. I hate to say it, but I blame it mainly on Burton, because he could have decided. I got to believe that Seth Grahame-Smith was doing what he got hired to do. You know, that he was told to make it funny and make it jokey, and he did. And it's so funny, this phenomenon that you just pointed out, Adam, is a big deal, where any movie, no matter how poorly written, or if it's a big deal movie, or whatever the tone is, nevertheless, it's going to have a whole art production team on it. And if they are expert guys, they're going to do the best that they can. And, you know, a Gothic mansion is going to look like a Gothic mansion, whether it's, you know, basically a big comedy or whether it's, a mainstream horror film. And it can be so weird, you know, to deal with the fact that you have this difference of so much attention being paid to a set that looks like it should be a straight film. Well, I know that we probably should be trying to push towards wrapping up. So I think what we should do now is do our final thoughts on Dark Shadows, and then come around again for our endorsements. So let's go the same direction we did before. Drew, Julia, Adam, and Jason. So Drew, final thoughts and anything that you want to throw in that we may not have hit on before.
Well, first off, something that we did not talk about, I have to say, is flawed as this movie is, I feel like Michelle Pfeiffer actually does not get near enough credit, because I think she does an excellent job at kind of holding all these disparaging and all these, like, divergent elements together. She's, like, I really like her in this movie, and I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if anybody else feels the same, but kudos to her for a strong performance, which could have easily just walked through and collected a paycheck, and you know, I'm glad that she put forth the effort. Having said that, though, I don't hate this movie. I fully set out to hate it, but I don't hate it. However, I would not recommend it unless you were really, really, really bored. And even if you are, there's 1,000 other things you can watch before this. It's just so ho-hum. You know, there's nothing really. You know, you're not going to be thinking on this movie for days and days afterwards. It's not exceptional. It's not even exceptionally bad. That's the thing. This movie got reamed by the critics, and it's not even bad enough to be like, oh my God. You know, it's just kind of there. Wow.
Okay, so just kind of there. Anything else would do. Watch Horror House with Frankie Avalon. You'll have a better time. This is Drew's scenario. Okay. Who was next? Was it Julia goes next? All right, Julia, lay it on us. What are your final thoughts?
Well, you know, I like I said, I think it's funny, and I enjoy Johnny Depp. I enjoyed the music. I think that probably was one of my favorite things. I loved the use of Nights in White Satin. I loved the use of Season of the Witch by Donovan.
Oh yeah.
And I loved the montage, the Top of the World montage. It's just so funny. I mean, it's just, like the way that they kind of go into it, even from like there was this dramatic. Oh well, like I said, the thing with him laying on the synthesizer, and it's like this dramatic thing. I can't remember what his line is, but he says some dramatic line, and then it goes into that Top of the World song. And it's just, I just think that they did that really good job with that part of it, the humor thing. But yeah, for sure. As much as I love Helena Bonham Carter, I could have done without Julia's character. I could have done without the werewolf thing at the end. There's some things like that. I was confused by a few different things, but you know, it's fun, and I think it's meant to be just a love letter to the fans of the original series as much as anything else. And I think that I'm guessing that probably was you know.
Do you think, and Adam can answer this as well. Well, anybody can. Would fans of the show like this? How do fans? I have no idea how fans of the show feel about this parody of Dark Shadows. I have no idea.
I mean, like out there in the world, I don't remember seeing a lot about people's reaction. You guys might know. I know how I felt as a fan, and I thought it was interesting. Listen, I've seen so many television reboots of Dark Shadows that have just been, I saw a very serious one in the in the 70s.
Oh, that's important. Yeah, you're right.
It was, it was ounce for ounce, very much like the Jonathan Frid one, which I think was a world better than the made-for-TV one that they did, even though I felt the ending was really kind of rushed in the Jonathan Frid version. There was, I think they'd gone down the road. I think trading on the fact that it was a soap opera was an interesting idea, and to sort of play it in a way that was, not straight comedy, but horror comedy, something, a blend, a hybrid. I think was a really good idea. I think they just could have, in the end, done a better job of it. I think taking the things that made it interesting, the fact that it kind of was a soap opera, the fact that some of the characters were sort of overdrawn, Barnabas in particular, and I think that you see a bunch of this with Johnny Depp. I think that's great. But if you've sort of taken him and taken those bits, and I think Drew's right about some of the humor. I think it misses, and I think some of those stuff just falls flat. But I think if you'd wrap that up in a different package, I think that probably would have been a refreshing take. If it had been a smart version of it, and you're going, oh, it's like this because of the soap opera, but it has this element to it that makes it really interesting. You could have reintroduced it to another generation, I think, in a way. In this way, I think otherwise it just became a big miss.
That's what disappoints me about it, because I think if they had been a little tighter with it, they would have had something with a lot stronger mass appeal instead of trying, to make it so ludicrous, because there was aspects of the show that were ludicrous. I think if they had just trimmed a little bit of fat, they could have had a hit on their hand, and they could have had an exceptional movie instead of one that's just kind of average.
It's funny, because in theory, sometimes you can wind up with a sequel, even a movie. This movie made money. It wasn't a massive hit, but on the other hand, it wasn't. People think of it as a flop, but it actually did okay. I mean, the movie, turned a sizable profit. So, in theory, they might end up deciding to do another one, and I think it would be interesting, for them to decide how would they calibrate, the tone. Think of a movie like The Avengers, that really included a great deal of humor, and yet was also, it was also an adventure that you could get into and have character scenes where you really cared about the characters. So it's not like it's impossible, although. But
Josh Whedon was the screenwriter on that, and let's face it, I did enjoy Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, but I will not say that the screenplay was the greatest. So whereas Josh Whedon can deal with a large cast and make it work.
This is a really good point. It's funny to think what Joss Whedon would have done with this material. Wow, that's the most depressing thought, in as much as it's such a wonderful thought, but that's come across me all night. All right, my final thoughts, I think this is a really beautiful movie, but a couple of weeks ago I said that all I really look for anymore in a lot of movies is just a couple of scenes that I can take away with me that I think are really wonderful. And if that happens and there's nothing that's completely offensive, then I'll be okay with it. This movie has the wonderful beginning bit on the train with Knights in White Satin that has that great set of the fishing village, which I think is beautiful. So there are things here that I really enjoy. I think even as a fan of Dark Shadows, you can enjoy this. But it certainly has its frustrating little flaws. So, and that more or less concludes our list of Dark Shadows movies. Although we may still do Dan Curtis Dracula, we're going to have to confer on that one, and I think if we do, it'll be a bonus. But that gets us through the entire Dark Shadows movie selection. But what are our endorsements this week? Does anybody have anything?
I got something.
Okay. All right, Drew, go ahead.
This last week, I ventured into my friendly neighborhood half-price books, and I picked up Super Gods by Grant Morrison, who is one of my favorite comic book writers. This is actually a prose. It's kind of hard to pin down what exactly this book is because it's one part history of the comic book industry, one part autobiography, and one part metaphysical essay on superheroes. But it's a fascinating read, and if you're somebody that has written for superheroes before in any shape or form, I think you would be able to take a lot of ideas from it. I mean, I have literally felt like my brain has been on fire ever since finishing it. I just been wanting to write so badly. And I'm not going to say it's perfect, but Morrison is a very spirited writer, and he can cram more interesting ideas into one of his failures than most writers can put into their successes.
Wow.
So check this out if you're interested in comics and writing for comics.
All right, outstanding. Adam, you had endorsements for us?
Yeah, I've been watching Brian Fuller's Hannibal on NBC with Matt.
Okay, I've not seen a single episode, so you're telling me that it is worth watching.
Watch the pilot. I find it all takes, no spoilers of that. It all takes place prior to, Silence of the Lambs and all that. So it's really interesting. It's sort of a time when, Hannibal Lecter is still free, and it's very interesting. And Mads Mikkelsen, who was the bad guy in Casino Royale, plays Lecter, and he's eminently watchable. And it's got it's interesting how it's done. I find myself, I liked it when I first saw it, and I'm still sticking with it. So it's with a lot of things either over or waiting for next season. It was getting kind of thin in terms of just things that I was wanting to watch. But we started watching it, and it's not a disappointment at all. It's really interesting, which I haven't said that about stuff on NBC in a while. But
very cool.
It's totally worth checking out.
Very cool. Julia, did you have anything you wanted to endorse this weekend?
No, I saw Iron Man 3 this weekend. That was fun. But that's about it.
Admittedly, we've been surrounded by boxes, so there hasn't been a lot.
Yeah, you've been busy.
Having said that, I did watch Tales That Witness Madness, which is a British anthology, and it just made me think that we need to do a retrospective on horror anthologies, because this was yet another one of those ones that's made in this case 1973, but basically through the 60s and in all the way to 1980, you had these, mostly from Amicus Productions, these contemporary horror anthologies that would usually have like a framing device about 5 people in an asylum or trapped in an elevator or somewhere touring a bunch of caverns or whatever, or in a wax museum, and they would tell their stories, and all the stories would be creepy on the level of like, Vault of Horror or Tales from the Crypt, which are in fact the titles of 2 of these movies. And Tales of Witness Madness is yet another one. Basically, my endorsement is go to Netflix or to Amazon Prime or any one of these and find yourself some Amicus anthologies and just watch them. They're so wonderful for that crazy 60s and the 70s, the fashions and the just curious way of filming. They're so London. They're so sort of swinging London, that whole era. And I love these things. So that's my endorsement, is the whole realm of horror anthologies of the 60s and 70s. And with that, I'm really thankful that you guys had the patience to wait around for us to get moved to Colorado and return to the Dark Shadows retrospective. And Adam, thanks for joining us. Drew,
completely.
Great to have you here once again. Julia, I will see you in a couple of minutes. And, All right. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you hopefully next week.
Okay. Good night.
Thanks.
Later.
Bye.